Last week we asked whether Voldemort was somehow inside Harry. This week we finally get a clearer answer. Harry is not possessed, but the connection between them is real. Voldemort now knows about it, and whatever door exists in Harry's mind might swing both ways. And somehow Dumbledore's solution to this is making Severus Snape responsible for Harry's emotional control. How could this possibly go wrong? Hello, witches, wizards, and muggles alike. Welcome back to Magic Muggle, a Harry Potter after show. I'm your host, Eric Cicada, aka Mr. Honest, your resident Ravenclaw, lifelong Harry Potter fan of the movies, and first time making my way through the end of this series in the books. Today, we're covering chapters 23 and 24 of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Christmas on the Closed Ward, and Occlumency. These chapters give us one of the most quietly heartbreaking scenes in the entire series so far, some deeply suspicious behavior from Kreacher, a near duel between two grown men who absolutely know better, and Harry's first lesson in magical mind defense, which is somehow even less therapeutic than you would imagine. Let's dive right into chapter 23, Christmas on the Closed Ward. This chapter begins with Harry becoming convinced that he did not merely witness an attack on Arthur Weasley, that he committed it. And what makes this so effective is how quickly Harry turns every unanswered question into evidence against himself. Dumbledore will not look at him, so Harry assumes Dumbledore is afraid of what he might see. Members of the Order keep guarding him, so Harry decides the guards must be protecting everybody from him. He remembers that Voldemort is searching for a weapon and reaches the most horrifying conclusion possible. I'm the weapon. Harry is not primarily afraid that Voldemort will hurt him. He's afraid that Voldemort will use him to hurt everyone he loves. So before anybody can accuse him or reject him, Harry decides to exile himself. He packs his trunk and prepares to return to Privet Drive because in his mind, loneliness has become the only way to keep the people he cares about safe. It's very heroic and very noble. And it's such a believable spiral. The adults have given Harry fragments of information, refused to explain how those fragments connect, and left his frightened 15-year-old brain to complete the puzzle by itself. Of course he builds the worst possible picture. It's so relatable. Phineas Nigelius stops him with a message from Dumbledore. Stay where you are. He also gives Harry a lecture about adolescent self-importance and trusting Dumbledore's judgment. As Phineas is not completely wrong, Harry does not know everything Dumbledore knows, and following Dumbledore has generally kept him alive. But stay where you are is an instruction, not an explanation. It might stop Harry from physically leaving the house, but it does nothing to stop the terror that made him pack in the first place. So as we're going through these chapters and Dumbledore in this book in general, he is very confusing from the outside eye, and I feel like Rowling does make a point to let us feel that along with Harry. He's being kind of ominous. It feels like he's in Harry's corner, but he doesn't want to really fill Harry in on anything. And I think that's very reasonable for Harry to have suspicions and be very curious and even worried, because you're leaving him the space to fill in the explanation. And that's a criticism to Dumbledore until we find out exactly why Dumbledore is doing what he's doing. If we find that out, it's very it's frustrating for the audience, because we have always seen Dumbledore reassure Harry, give Harry advice, guide Harry through whatever trials and tribulations are going through his mind especially. And now it seems like in Harry's darkest hour, is his silence actively making Harry less safe? You know, it makes you wonder. Harry eventually falls asleep and once again finds himself in that windowless corridor, moving toward the locked black door. Whatever lies beyond it feels like something he wants more than anything. So even before anyone explains the connection to him, it's clearly becoming stronger and more specific. The person who finally breaks Harry out of his spiral is not Dumbledore, Sirius, or any other adult. It's Ginny. Hermione abandons her ski trip, arrives at Grimmauld Place, and gathers Ron and Ginny for what is basically an intervention. Harry insists that everybody has been avoiding him. They tell him he has been avoiding them. Hermione jokes that perhaps they are all taking turns looking at each other and simply keep missing, which is exactly the kind of joke Harry is in absolutely no mood to appreciate. Then Ginny reminds him that she is the only person in the room who actually knows what being possessed by Voldemort feels like. Harry admits that he forgot, And Ginny answers, lucky you. I, as an audience member, underestimate Ginny, maybe because we've seen her start so young, coming to Hogwarts in book 2. And now she's kind of got a lot of agency, and after all she's been through, she has a great perspective too. Lucky you lands because Ginny's possession in the Chamber of Secrets is something the rest of them survived and moved beyond, but Ginny had to live it. She knows the warning signs, missing time, blank stretches of memory, and waking up without knowing what she's done. Harry has none of those. Ron even watched him remain in bed while the attack happened. Ginny does not calm Harry with an empty promise that everything is fine. She gives him evidence, and almost immediately, Harry starts eating, rejoining the conversation, and feeling like himself again. This might be one of my favorite Ginny moments in the series so far. She does in 2 minutes what every adult around Harry has failed to do. She takes his fear seriously and answers it directly. Christmas arrives. Sirius is singing God Rest Ye Merry Hippogriffs, and for a little while Grimmauld Place actually feels like a home. But Rowling quietly plants several warning signs underneath all that Christmas decoration. We always love Christmas in Harry Potter. It's always a special moment, just like real Christmas. And I love Christmas. Percy returns his Weasley jumper without even asking whether his father is alive. Hermione discovers Kreacher's den beneath the boiler, where he has rescued photographs of the Black family and placed Bellatrix Lestrange's picture in front and center. More importantly, Kreacher himself is missing. Sirius assumes he's hiding somewhere in the house, but Harry correctly points out that Dobby managed to leave the Malfoys without permission. House elves might be magically bound, but that does not mean they are physically incapable of going somewhere their master would not want them to go. I am placing all of that directly onto the conspiracy board. The Christmas visit to St. Mungo's begins with Arthur experimenting with Muggle stitches, Molly realizing that her husband has literally allowed somebody to sew him back together, and every child in the room suddenly deciding that tea sounds wonderful. It's the perfect Weasley comedy. And I just love that a normal thing like getting stitches is so taboo to Mrs. Weasley. But that escape leads them into the closed ward, where the chapter changes completely. First, they find Gilderoy Lockhart. He is still cheerful, vain, and desperate to sign autographs, but he cannot remember why anybody would want one. He proudly announces himself, and despite his kind of craziness he's got going on, we learn that he never receives visitors, despite him always wanting to give autographs. It's funny because Lockhart is still somehow Lockhart. It's also sadder than I expected. He caused his own condition while attempting to destroy Harry and Ron's memories. So my sympathy is not endless, because watching somebody retain the performance of an identity after losing the life behind it is pretty unsettling. We also see the injured ministry employee Broderick Bode receive a strange potted plant with moving tentacles. Maybe it is harmless. Maybe this book has simply trained me to distrust every plant, package, dream, elf, doorway, and adult. Either way, conspiracy board. And then Neville appears. Harry immediately understands who must be lying behind the curtains at the end of the ward. Frank and Alice Longbottom, Neville's parents, who were tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange and the other Death Eaters until they permanently lost their sanity. I want to note that I don't talk about differences between the book and the movie often, but I think I might be a little bit more, because I think Neville is such more of a prominent character in this series. Don't get me wrong, he's in the movies, but I think in the book you really get a bigger scope on his story, which makes me much more invested in his character. Neville has never told his friends. His grandmother insists that there's nothing to be ashamed of, and she's right about that. But privacy is not the same thing as shame. Neville should have been allowed to decide when and how he shared the most painful part of his life. Then Alice Longbottom walks towards her son and gives him an empty gum wrapper. His grandmother sees something disposable. Neville quietly says, "Thanks, Mom," and slips it into his pocket. That tiny action tells us more about Neville than pages of exposition could. His mother cannot explain what she feels or give him the relationship that they should have had, but she can still reach for him. The wrapper is not valuable because of what it is. It's valuable because in that moment it's the only thing his mother knows how to give him, and Neville understands that. His grandmother keeps comparing him to the gifted father he never truly got to know, but Neville's strength is already visible. He keeps showing up. He keeps trying. He joined Dumbledore's army because he wanted to become capable, even while carrying a history most of his classmates know nothing about. This all shows us so much about Neville and what he's been kind of keeping to himself. It kind of reframes Neville's story up to this point, going all the way back to book 1. His grandma, the person to give him the remembrall. There were moments that are very painful even to look back at because Neville doesn't have it super easy. And the weight he carries is similar to what Harry carries himself. And I think it's important for Harry to have a friend in his life to relate to that kind of trauma and pain. And you could tell how much Harry really does feel for Neville. The scene ends with Lockhart demanding more attention for his joined up writing, which is almost cruelly perfect. Life inside this ward is heartbreaking, absurd, and ordinary all at once. I do love the Gilderoy Lockhart cameo. These are the type of moments that I hope to see in the HBO series. Chapter 24, Occlumency. At the beginning of Chapter 24, Kreacher reappears with a story about hiding in the attic. Sirius accepts it, but I do not. Kreacher comes back less openly hostile, unusually obedient, and repeatedly stares at Harry when he thinks Harry's not looking. Combined with the missing time, Bellatrix's photograph, and Harry's earlier warning that house elves can leave without permission, this feels like an alarm disguised as a background detail. Meanwhile, Sirius begins sinking back into depression as Harry's return to Hogwarts approaches. Then Snape arrives at Grimmauld Place with Dumbledore's latest plan. Harry must learn Occlumency, the magical defense of the mind, and Snape will teach him. On paper, Snape is apparently one of the most accomplished Occlumens available. In practice, asking Harry to learn emotional discipline from the adult most capable of provoking him feels completely insane. Before even the first lesson happens, Sirius and Snape nearly duel in the kitchen. Snape attacks Sirius for being useless and trapped inside his mother's house. Sirius calls Snape Lucius Malfoy's lapdog. Snape calls Sirius a coward. Wands come out, and Harry has to physically place himself between them. There is some spectacular irony here. Harry is being told that he needs to control his emotions, while two adults responsible for helping him immediately lose control of theirs. Neither man is innocent. Snape deliberately presses on Sirius's deepest wound because he knows it will hurt. Sirius takes the bait and proves that Snape can still control him with a few carefully chosen words. They are no longer students, but the schoolyard never really ended for either of them. And Harry is once again forced to manage damage that began before he was born. Well, we all know how Snape treats Harry. It's kind of an unfair and type of cruel way. He's very hard on Harry. And when Sirius kind of sees that up front, we usually don't have somebody in Harry's corner that is even capable of standing up to Snape or who even can try to see it from Harry's perspective. So I can understand why Sirius gets defensive. But Snape should be a little bit more mature and maybe look at the whole picture and not take that as a personal attack that Harry's godfather wants to stand up for him. And instead of laying down his biggest problem at the moment, he can't leave his own home. And that's very hard on him. So I think they're both justified because, Sirius does kind of bring it on. However, I kind of understand where he's coming from. And Snape is just following orders from Dumbledore. I'm sure if he could choose, he wouldn't really take this job of Occlumency, teaching Harry. And I think personally, Snape would rather not even be there. So when Sirius stands up to him, it's just an inconvenience. And Snape doesn't want to hear any of that when he doesn't even want to be here in the first place. Arthur's perfectly timed return from St. Mungo's prevents the duel. The following morning, Sirius gives Harry a wrapped object and says it will allow Harry to contact him if Snape mistreats him. Harry immediately decides that he will never use it, despite what it even is, because he refuses to endanger Sirius, who does seem a little bit to put himself in danger without realizing it. One of the biggest things Snape reveals while arguing with Sirius is that Lucius Malfoy did notice him on platform 9 3/4 the day that Harry was going back to Hogwarts after the summer. It goes to show that Sirius, his judgment isn't 100% good, even though his intentions are 100% pure. And I totally respect the intention that Harry has by not even wanting to use whatever it is. But please open it. I'm very curious to see this emergency communication package. The trip back to Hogwarts is mostly a violent night bus ride, followed by one small romantic victory. Cho tries to ask Harry about spending Valentine's Day in Hogsmeade together. Harry's brain displays a brief loading symbol, and eventually he catches up and officially asks her out. Good for him. He will need that happiness because at 6 o'clock he walks into Snape's office for the least relaxing meditation class in wizarding history. To Snape's credit, he finally gives Harry some real information. Legilimency is not quite literal mind reading. It allows a skilled witch or wizard to enter another person's mind, access memories and emotions, and interpret what they find. Occlumency allows someone to close those thoughts away. The failed curse that marked Harry as a baby also created a connection between his mind and Voldemort's. Until the attack on Mr. Weasley, Voldemort apparently did not realize Harry had been receiving pieces of his thoughts and emotions. But when Harry entered the snake's mind so completely, Voldemort became aware of him and realized the connection might work in reverse. That changes everything. Harry's visions have been useful, but now they could potentially be manipulated. Voldemort may be able to see what Harry sees, learn what Harry knows, or make Harry believe something that is not true. There's also a tiny moment when Harry uses Voldemort's name and Snape angrily tells him to stop. Harry points out that Dumbledore says it, and Snape unconsciously rubs the dark mark on his arm. For 1 second, the cruelty drops away and we see fear. Snape understands Voldemort's power in a way Harry cannot yet fully understand. Before beginning, Snape removes several of his own memories and stores them in Dumbledore's pensieve. He offers no explanation. If Snape is protecting those memories from Harry accidentally seeing them, then I would now very much like to know what they are. The lesson itself is brutal. Snape tells Harry to defend himself, gives him almost no practical instruction, and immediately forces his way through memories of the Dursleys humiliating him. The Sorting Hat offering him Slytherin, the Dementors at the lake, Cho beneath the mistletoe, and Cedric's body in the graveyard. Harry eventually fights back with a stinging hex, and Snape admits that the first attempt was not as poor as it might have been. That really does matter. Harry can resist. We already saw him fight off the Imperious Curse, and his instinct to protect the private memory of Cho gives him enough focus to push Snape away. But Snape's teaching method is almost designed to make him fail. He orders Harry to release all emotion while deliberately humiliating and provoking him. Snape is correct that Voldemort can use fear and anger as weapons. He's also demonstrating exactly why being excellent at a skill does not automatically make someone excellent at teaching it. You cannot shame somebody into becoming calm. I think there's a good mix here of tough love versus trauma. It seems like he could be sabotaging the lesson through his own hatred, but at the same time, he's trying to teach Harry something very important that Dumbledore assigned him to teach. So he could just be taking it very seriously. Snape has always been loyal as far as we could tell. We're always suspecting him. I am definitely from the very first book that he is doing something shady, and him being a former Death Eater but taken back by Dumbledore and brought to the light technically. It's hard for Harry to trust him because he never really saw how all that developed. He doesn't know the story. Neither do we. During the final attempt, Harry recognizes the corridor from his dreams. It is inside the ministry leading to the Department of Mysteries. Arthur was guarding that door when the snake attacked him, and Sturgis Podmore was arrested while trying to get through it. So the mysterious weapon Voldemort wants is almost certainly inside the Department of Mysteries. Snape is visibly unsettled when Harry works this out, which only confirms that Harry has found something very important. And instead of making him less curious, the Occlumency lesson has now given him a real-world location for the place Voldemort desperately wants to enter. Then the chapter ends by proving just how dangerous this connection has become. After having his mind repeatedly broken open by Snape, Harry's scar erupts with pain. He collapses and begins laughing because Voldemort is jubilant. Something Voldemort has wanted for a very long time has finally happened, and his happiness floods through Harry, so completely that Voldemort's laughter comes out of Harry's own mouth. Harry entered the lesson hoping to strengthen his mind. He leaves believing Snape may have weakened it. Last week, we called Harry the doorway. Now Voldemort knows that the doorway exists. Harry knows where it leads, and neither of them seems capable of keeping it closed. Whatever made Voldemort happier than he has been in 14 years cannot possibly be good news. So these chapters worked for me because the biggest developments are not spells or battles. There are the moments where someone's mind becomes either understood or invaded. Ginny helps Harry by naming what possession actually feels like. Neville's mother reaches him with the only gesture she can make, and Snape, meanwhile, tries to teach Harry control by tearing through the memories Harry has never been allowed to properly heal from. Harry is not possessed, but he is not safe. Kreacher is acting suspiciously. Something dangerous is hidden inside the Department of Mysteries, and Voldemort has just received the best news he has had since his fall. So yes, I'm sure the next chapter will be a relaxing return to normal school life. If you want to keep the conversation going after the episode, come join our Discord using the invite link in the show notes. That is the place to tell me what you thought of these chapters. Share your theories and talk Harry Potter with the rest of our growing community. Just remember, I'm still a first-time reader, so keep anything beyond Chapter 24 locked up tighter than the Department of Mysteries. If you're enjoying this journey through the books with me, make sure you're following Magic Muggle so every new episode finds you. You can also rate or review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It only takes a moment, but it genuinely helps more witches, wizards, and muggles discover what we're building here. And if you know another Harry Potter fan who would enjoy revisiting the story alongside someone experiencing this part of it for the very first time, send this episode their way. I'll be back next week as we continue deeper into Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Until then, wands down, hearts full.